Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Employee to Boss podcast. I'm your host, Haley Hayhurst, the owner of Espresso Podcast Production, a full-service podcasting agency specializing in editing, marketing, and strategy, where I help businesses and brands launch their podcasts and manage them so they can reach the right audience, connect with the right clients, and really build their revenue. Today, I am joined with my guest, Regan Bashara, aka the Numbers Witch. I thought that this episode was perfect for Halloween. Happy Halloween, everyone, because Regan says that she helps you find the magic in the numbers, because the numbers in the data of your business, such as your revenue, your expenses, those all show so much about where you are in business, where you can grow, and how you're doing. We talk all about how she is a bookkeeper. We talk about how to start with your bookkeeping. She's coming out with a bookkeeping course soon. And then she also gives us some great tips of how to read our data, what we should be looking at, and just financial literacy, such as what terms we need to know. Like I said, what numbers we need to look at. Because you can be making money and still be burning cash, as she says. You could be not making, you could be in the red every month. You could be in the green every month. And a lot of people in business just don't know, because if you're anything like me, numbers are stressful. Numbers are scary. That's the Halloween theme. I definitely do not have a strong suit in math and accounting and all of those things, but thankfully, there's people like Regan who can do it for you. The greatest thing about this is she shares that when she works with clients, she's not judgmental at all. So she gives the example of someone came to her and needed 7 years of their bookkeeping backlogged, and she was like, yep, let's make it happen. Of course, she loves working with clients who maybe, don't have to go back 7 years, but she is willing to take on a task like that. So if you are in the market for a bookkeeper or just want to learn more about bookkeeping, check out Regan's website, alleaseaccounting.com. You can join her newsletter and get a lot of information from there. She gives a lot of actionable tips, and she also has a podcast that you can also find on her website, where she discusses money, finance, and business. She posts episode weekly, and she said that soon she will be bringing on guests to bring in some new perspectives, but she's been doing it for about a year. And since I love podcasts, that is my whole business, I love asking people about how they leverage their podcast to grow their business. So she gives some great examples that you'll learn a lot from. So if you are in the spooky spirit and money is one of those things where you're like, this episode is for you, because she really, like her business is called, brings you to ease. All right, let's get right into this episode. Hey, Regan, thank you so much for joining me on the Employee to Boss podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm great. Thanks so much for having me on. I'm excited to talk to your audience.
Yeah, I'm excited too, because I think, well, for me necessarily, I hate math. I hate all things numbers. It just is one of those things as a business owner you have to get over, but it's a struggle. So I'm excited to have you on to kind of tell us all of your expertise today.
Yeah, I feel like I should have a jar in the background that's like, put another coin in there when somebody gets on and tells me they hate math and money. And I'm like, yep, that's why I'm here to talk about it. Hopefully reduce stress and anxiety, give people some practical tips to really dive into the thing that they've been avoiding.
Well, if you want to start off by telling us more about who you are and your journey from employee to boss, the audience would love to learn more.
Yeah, absolutely. I am the founder of All Ease Accounting. I'm a bookkeeper. I call myself the Numbers Witch because there is magic in your business data, and we're going to uncover that together. And I went from employee to, well, I'm not anybody's boss yet, but I went from employee to entrepreneur in May of 2022. I had worked for the same accounting firm for 7 years and decided it was time to go out on my own and do the things that I've always wanted to do and create a business for myself.
Very cool. What were some of the telling signs that you were ready to transition to entrepreneurship, and what were some of the first steps that you took to actually doing that?
Yeah, the first, well, I don't know if it was a sign necessarily. It's just I had like a couple of pretty big life events happen. And that really woke me up to realizing that I was not up for being miserable every day of my life. And I found that like the only way to really bust out and like be creative in the way I want to and to show up and do the work that I want to be doing and that I love doing is by starting my own business. And then the first step is to like have a panic attack.
Of course, of course.
Maybe crunch some numbers, look at my personal finances, see like, okay, what do I need to bring in to like pay my bills and stay alive? And then that can kind of just be my starting point, right?
Yeah, I like that because when you get into entrepreneurship, there's so many people who are like, yes, I just hit like a 30K month, 40K month. And I've talked about this before on the podcast where sometimes you just don't even need to have those goals. And so it's nice to
Yes.
see like what you need to make to
Mhm.
survive and like be happy and live your life. And that could be your first starting point.
Yeah. Like staying alive is important, paying bills. Like if you have any sort of credit card debt, student loan payments just restarted this month. I have been crunching numbers actually this week about like setting that goal for myself for my business, which is not a big audacious goal. It's like I would like to be able to bring this home and build my savings up again because becoming a business owner, by the way, you will go through your savings. And letting that kind of be where I want to get to on the way to having a bigger goal. And just I think a lot of people are like, oh, I need like capital funding and investments, and or I need to like get a loan, or I need to build up my savings first. And it's like you can do entrepreneurship so many different ways. And for me, the way that I did it was I had a pretty good amount of savings, went through that. I'm also married. My husband has a salary job, like he's bringing in income, and that is stable and reliable, but also used personal credit. You can build business credit, but sometimes we do rely on personal credit. So right before I quit my job, I like paid off the credit card so that I would have plenty of kind of room to buy the software that I needed and to really get my business started up. So it can look a different way for so many people, but sitting down and thinking about that, taking the time to sleep on it, not pulling the trigger until you're pretty sure about like what things are going to look like is my recommendation.
Yeah, and that's great advice. And one of the things that I saw all over your website was about financial literacy and how you
Yes.
people kind of learn this. So, for small business owners and entrepreneurs, what is financial literacy, first of all, and what do we need to know to actually like start a business, like foundational steps?
Yeah, the financial literacy that I'm talking about is like the actual words that are used in accounting language and accounting speak. I was having like a coffee chat with someone earlier, and I was telling them that when we talk about assets in accounting, people that use the word asset just in like day-to-day life mean something completely different from what accountants mean when they say asset. So having that financial literacy means like you don't need to know all the language, the glossary of accounting terms. You need to use language in your business that makes sense to you, that is relatable to you, and that you can read your reports and understand what those numbers mean. So, financial literacy is not only being able to look at your data, but to understand it and use it to make decisions.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, assets could mean a lot of things. Like I'm a podcast producer, so every
Yeah.
week I send my clients a web person assets and it's just graphics
Yeah.
and so that makes a lot
Right.
of sense. So what are some foundational terms or things that entrepreneurs need to know when they're getting started on their financial journey?
Yeah, so like the terms that people most often hear when they think about like accounting are taxes, of course, but there's so many different kinds of taxes. Getting really clear about like what your business structure is, once before you set it up or once it gets set up, and knowing how that impacts your individual taxes, whether you need to pay sales tax. If you have people on payroll, there's payroll tax, there's quarterly estimated taxes. And when somebody goes, well, what do I do about taxes? I'm always like, which tax are we talking about? There's like so many different ones. It depends on where you live. It depends on how your business is set up. And then getting clear about the tax language, how being an entrepreneur impacts you personally with your taxes. And then people often think about financial reports as like, it's just my P&L, which stands for profit loss statement or your income statement. And it's shorthand. And a lot of people think that's the only, report that you need to look at. There's actually 3 reports that I recommend folks look at on a regular basis. The profit and loss statement, yes. That's going to show you where you're making your money. And then also the balance sheet. Like, what are the assets that I hold in my business? What kind of equipment? What kind of like software? Even when you're talking about like website assets or like social media graphics or transcripts for podcast episodes, all those like assets are like, they have value in your business, and we can look at that on our reports. So the balance sheet is important. And then finally, cash flow is another big term that we always need to talk about, right? We need to see whether or not your business is bringing in cash or whether it's burning cash. And you can be at a profit and be burning cash. That's me currently. So looking at all 3 of those statements and reports gives us a very clear picture of what's going on in our business. So having the literacy to be able to talk about those reports, profit and loss statement, cash flows, and then the balance sheet, and understanding kind of how they relate together will give you the tools that you need and the language that you need to be able to make decisions.
Yeah. And when you were introducing yourself, you said that there's magic in the data or
Yes.
number. What does that look like, and what does that mean to you?
Yeah. So I often find that folks come to me when they're in kind of like chaos or burnout or overwhelm, and they've been procrastinating on this, doing the data entry, doing the work to like get their books in order. And they're really living in the dark about their business. You can be making money, you can be spending money, and still have no idea what is going on in your business if you don't like regularly look at your data. So I find I'm a wooey kind of person, like just a little bit. I'm not like very woo, but that's why I call myself the numbers witch, because like we're taking just like numbers, which are black and white, like on a piece of paper. It's a number. It is what it is. But we can take that and analyze it. I talk to my clients about what's going on in their business. What do they think is happening in their business versus what the reports say? And seeing like, where's this disconnect between what you're doing every day, how you're spending money, what you think you're making, are you worried about taxes, all that. And then we actually pull your numbers and look at your reports and see like, is there a disconnect here? If you want to get to a certain place in your business, if you want to set a goal and apply strategy, we need to have a way to track that in the numbers. So it's not just data entry. It is not just like typing in what you spent at Starbucks. It is a lot more than that. And there's a lot of like magic that can be found in that day-to-day data.
Yeah, totally. So when you work with your clients, do you just work with their business, or do you work with like their personal finances as well?
So right now I only work with people who own businesses, and I work with their business data. So anything that's happening in their business, checking accounts, credit cards, how they're making revenue. But I also help inform how that's going to impact their taxes. I did tax returns for many years. I don't currently do tax returns because I hate it. And I have a lot of experience to draw on to kind of help folks demystify that. Like, we can look at your reports all year long, and I can help make suggestions about taking a tax deduction or making an estimated payment, and help folks prepare for the fact that they might owe this year. Like, I don't want it to be a surprise to them. So I can apply a lot of that like analysis and experience to help them make decisions that do affect their personal finances.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. And one of the things you just mentioned was like the strategy when it comes to hitting your goals for money. And I talk a lot about like marketing strategies, social media strategies, podcast strategies, things like that. But I don't think I've ever really heard about a money strategy. And
Mm.
so that's super interesting to me. Of course, like you can see how many clients you need to hit this revenue and kind of like that. But do you want to tell us a little bit more about building out a money strategy for your business?
Totally. And I mean, essentially, that is what it comes down to, right? Like knowing how much your offers cost, how many like clients you need to participate in that offer to get to a revenue goal. You can have goals other than just making money, of course. But the way that I like to sit down and strategize with my clients in the role that I play is helping them figure out a way to track it in their bookkeeping so we can get very clear about where they're starting from, where they want to end up, and like the steps that we take along the way. You can have a one-off product or offer or service that you sell that someone just pays for once. My monthly bookkeeping services are paid on a monthly basis. So I have like recurring revenue from certain clients. And I am kind of developing not a formula, but just a way to input all those things, play around with the numbers, and really decide like if I sell, 5 monthly bookkeeping package to these clients, then I can just sell a couple of trainings on QuickBooks and I can meet my goal. Or do I want to focus more on the trainings instead of trying to sell the monthly bookkeeping? So it goes hand in hand with the marketing strategies, I think, but having a system to put all the data into before we start taking money from people is crucial.
Yeah, and I was going to ask about that. When do people actually should they be investing in a bookkeeper? Because I know in the beginning where you're like not sure what's going on and you're not ready to hire on people. The other part of this question is like, how do you recommend that they keep track of their money?
hmm Yeah, I get this question a lot from folks that they're like, what revenue do I need to get to before I start like doing my bookkeeping or tracking my finances? And I'm like, $0. Like before you start taking money from folks, have a system to track it. And by tracking it, I just mean like what money you made in revenue and then what your expenses are, and having a system where that data lives. And this comes down to like the nitty-gritty day-to-day transacting, but bookkeeping needs to be done for the lifetime of the business. Once you set up your business, established it, start taking money from folks, the IRS wants to know about it. It's going to get reported on your taxes. So if you're making $20 a month, if you're making $10,000 a month, it has to be tracked the same way. So I would say invest in some sort of financial accounting system from the get-go. Whether or not you hire somebody to teach you how to do it, you buy a course that's going to teach you how to do it, you get a template like an Excel spreadsheet or something, which I hate spreadsheets. But if you're not going to hire it out, and I understand like the affordability of my kind of services, like it's not for everybody, but when you are just bringing in so much per month, or if you have like a side hustle that is just a little bit of revenue every now and then, it's totally doable. I think everybody has the skill set that they can learn to do bookkeeping. Like you're capable of learning that and setting up a system for you to stick to.
Yeah, and speaking of courses, I know you mentioned that you have a digital bookkeeping course coming out in early 2024. Do you want to
Mhm.
tell a little bit more about like who that will serve, who is like best fit for that, and just where people can find more information?
Totally. Thanks for allowing me to come share that with your audience. I'm so excited to build this. I am excited to share it with the world. It's something that I've thought about for a long time, like many years when I was still an employee. I was like, I really think that this would serve the entrepreneurial community to have some place to go and like learn how to do this work self-paced from an expert. And what I'm developing is a course that is going to take you from employee to entrepreneur. And there are folks out there that start businesses, and I believe they're still operating in an employee mindset. They still show up to work every day, even if it's a home office, and check off tasks on their to-do list. And they don't have like an overall vision of their business, where it's going, the systems and structures that they kind of need to have in place. So I wanted to create this course to help folks nail that down and also learn how to do bookkeeping if that's what they're going to do themselves in your business, or like as a bookkeeper for contract hire. So a lot of it is going to be like step one, put your receipts in one place. And then it's also going to take into account, like, when you get to the point where you want to hire a workforce, or you want to contract out work, or you want to set a goal in your business, here's a system to help you track that goal and to like get it into your numbers. So I'm still in development of that content. It'll be available to the public in 2024. I'm so excited.
That is really exciting. And I think that's a course that a lot of people do need, because it can be scary to have someone in your business looking at like your revenue and numbers, especially when you're just starting and growing. So I think that's a really nice, no judgment type of situation where they can at least start by themselves, and then as they grow, outsource. So I'm excited for that. I'll definitely put your links in the show notes so people can keep an eye out for when that comes.
Yeah, if they get on my email list, I will send out information about beta testing that's available now. And then also when we get it launched next year, they'll be the first to know about it.
Okay, amazing. Perfect.
Yeah.
And another thing that you kind of mentioned earlier was like closing the gap between where like money is coming from, who they are, the goals that they have. And I know this is something that you mentioned a little bit ago, but do you want to tell us more about that as well? Because I think that's super interesting. Just like I said, judging ourselves is really easy when it comes to money. And so kind of how do we take that judgment out, especially when we are not at the goals that we want yet?
Yeah, totally. I have so much compassion for folks that come to me and they're like, all right, I'm ready. Like, just please tell me what to do, or like, please help. I hold so much compassion for them because money is extremely emotional for most of us. It brings up a lot of anxiety. We all have like these stories that we grew up with about money, and it's a lot of work to undo all that. And so I try to recognize and validate people's experiences with money without judgment. I know it is scary to let somebody else kind of like see what's going on in your financial life. And my clients only share with me like what they want to share with me. Like, I don't need to see everything. I don't want to know everything about that. But I think like the self-compassion part is especially needed when we are setting goals, because you can set a goal for whatever reason you want to, but a lot of us do it so that like we can finally say we did it, or we're proud of ourselves, or we're capable of doing something like that. But like, you can't prove to yourself that you're capable of something by doing it. Like, the belief has to come first, So creating the space for yourself for the compassion and not judging yourself ahead of time is going to make that process so much more enjoyable and like actually fun to participate in. If I have a goal, a revenue goal, because I am trying to prove something to an ex or something, I don't know, like, that's a weird motivation to come from, versus I want to build up and like remodel this part of my house, and I want to build up my savings in order to do that. Like, that to me feels a lot better than some other motivation where I'm trying to prove something. You know what I mean? So when folks come to me and they're stressed and anxious about like especially having to pay a lot in taxes, I don't shy away from like telling them the hard information either. I'm just actually going to be straightforward and real with you, because the numbers are black and white, and we can do some analysis, but I'd rather, if they do have to pay taxes, that we know about it as far in advance as possible, and I can help them create a strategy to make more money, to save the money ahead of time. Like, we can talk about it and I can hold their hand pretty much through that process. And I don't judge anybody for how they make or spend money. We all have our little habits when it comes to spending money, and there's no judgment here.
I think that's nice to hear too.
I've seen people that are like paying for OnlyFans out of their business account, and I'm like, you do you. That's girl boss behavior right there.
That really is. That really is. That's so funny.
You're
like,
just
no,
out here
girl.
living your life. I love that for you. We're not taking it as a business expense, but good
Right.
for you.
Right. You're like, let's change this account really fast.
Yep.
Like,
By the way, did you know that was coming out of your business account? Like, It's all good. No shame, but
That's
here's
hilarious.
what's going on.
I love that. No judgment,
Yeah.
just observations, right?
I really don't care at all. I'm just here to crunch numbers with you.
Yeah. No, I love that. I love that. Who is it that you specifically work with, and like what stage in business are they in?
I've worked with people that are preparing to start a business. Like one of my current clients well, they actually still do work for this company, but they decided to do what they do and start their own business, kind of like flying under the radar. And they've been in contact with me from the beginning, like from the moment they decided they wanted to do that. They were like, I need you to be like in my corner. And I'm like, I gotcha. So I love working with folks from the very beginning decision stages of starting a business. And then I have people come to me that I got a client off of TikTok, no less, that has 7 years of bookkeeping that they need to do before they can file their taxes. And I'm like, cool.
Oh my
I
gosh.
can totally do that for you. It's going to be a project. I'm not getting it done by the end of the week, but we
Yeah.
can totally do that. So, I mean, my preference is that we don't let it get that far behind,
Yeah.
but I also do work with folks on like the catch up.
Yeah. Better late than never, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. I was gonna ask because the bookkeeping industry can be quite saturated, quite competitive. There's a lot of bookkeepers, and I like how you brand yourself the numbers witch, and I'm sure that a lot of
Mhm.
people resonate with you because of that, or like the terms that you use. But do you have any other tips for getting clients as a bookkeeper and standing out in the industry?
Totally. I think really being yourself and articulating what does set you apart. I am definitely the black sheep out of most situations. Like I like that I stand out, but there's maybe also if you're wanting to like stand out and apart from your competition, there might be some work that you need to do internally about like being more visible, being the person that's like the odd man out. But I personally love showing up and just being like, yeah, this is, I don't know, I'm in my sweatpants right now. What do you want from me? I work from home. I think that the bookkeeping industry is made up of a lot of women, even though bookkeeping is like part of like the finance umbrella, which we all know is very like man dominated industry.
Um,
The bookkeepers tend to be women, like we're the ones doing the daily grunt work, of course. But I see it in a lot of like my Facebook ads and stuff being marketed as like the stay-at-home mom gig. And that's great. Like if you can carve time in your schedule of like managing a household and raising children to do this work for other people, that's wonderful. And I think that it is a great career for somebody that wants to work whenever they want to work
mhm.
and on like a regular kind of ritualistic basis. Everything that I do is like very like segmented and just like now on to the next month, now on to the next year. But standing apart is not the easiest thing to do, but I've just been doing this for so long that like it comes very naturally to me. It's something that I enjoy doing. I enjoy the day-to-day like data entry and reconciling people's accounts, and I also enjoy the face-to-face conversations with my clients. Like so if you're not really like the people kind of person, maybe you can just be the person doing the data entry, just doing reports. I love to sit down with my people and like hear what is going on in their lives and their businesses and like how I can support them. So that's like two aspects of the work. And you can do one or the other, you can do both. Like decide what is best suited for your life and what you want to be doing, I think.
That's great advice. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Mhm.
Reagan, I've loved this conversation. Is there anything else that you want to share?
I spend most of my time on TikTok, so if you want to come see me being like ridiculous, you can follow me there. Otherwise, I have a weekly podcast called Money Through Ease. So if your folks are obviously podcast listeners, they can come check that out. And I have discussions about money and finance and business. And then I'm actually going to start having guests soon too. So I'm really excited to like bring new folks on.
Very cool. And before
Yeah.
we wrap up, I want to ask you a question about your podcast since I love podcasting, right? It's my whole business.
Yeah. Yeah.
How do you use your podcast in your marketing do you have like a strategy with it? I mean, I talk about podcast strategy all the time, so
Yeah.
I like to have my guests talk about it too, so my audience doesn't get bored of my voice being like, to have a podcast and grow your business. So, do
Yeah.
you have any advice for, especially in your industry?
Stick with it. I I started about this time last year. I'm actually about to have like my 52nd weekly episode. So I'm like coming up
Congrats.
on my year. Thank you. And when I first started, I was like, I'm just gonna talk for a little bit, and then like barely clipped it down and just threw it up into the Spotify thing. And I use it mainly for like the folks that don't want to or can't pay me for my services directly. They get a lot of free value and like resources through that. So I want to provide that and have that be accessible for people. I use it almost like a journal or like a diary sometimes too. I'm just like, here's what I'm going through right now. And maybe it'll be helpful for you to hear somebody else kind of share their experience with it. But like sticking to your recording schedule, sticking to getting things posted, it doesn't matter if nobody ever it's like as long as you're consistently showing up, like you're going to build a body of work that will let people find you. That like, I mean, I'm no SEO expert, but there's so many ways to get in front of folks. And I personally listen to a lot of podcasts. So I'm like, it just kind of makes sense for me to do this. Like I want to bring people into my orbit that listen to podcasts too.
Absolutely. And that's like one of the best parts of podcasting, being able to grow your community and have
Hmm.
people find you. And it
Hmm.
gives you so much content as well. So,
Yeah. Yes. All the content all the time.
and long form content too, because, you can create a million reels, a million
Yeah.
TikToks, but once you sit down, like this podcast episode, I can probably create like 10 clips from this
Yeah.
alone.
Yeah.
And that
Right.
saves me so much time rather than like getting in front of my camera and being like, here's a 2 second or a 2 minute video of
Yeah.
what. So
And you can take the transcript and just like copy and paste a couple things, turn it into an Instagram post or a
yeah.
caption or email, whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. And
Yeah.
Regan, to start wrapping up the episode, I ask every guest this. I would love it if you could share 3 action steps for the audience to take to move forward with their business. Just to kind
Mhm.
of wrap up this conversation. How would you like to challenge the audience this week?
Totally. So, number one, get your paperwork and receipts and everything into one place. That's all you need to do to track your paperwork and receipts. Yes, you do need to keep receipts. I get that question. I'm like, the answer is yes, always. But just get them into one place, whether that's digital or like a physical shoebox. Don't tell me that you're doing that, but I guess you can. Just needs to be in one place. Make it simple for yourself. Number 2 tip would be to set a time and set a timer. I am pretty sure that I have ADHD. I don't have a diagnosis, but like a lot of the like ADHD hacks and tips like resonate for and I'm like, okay, maybe. But I have to set like time on my calendar to do my own bookkeeping, to do my
Mhm.
clients' bookkeeping, to manage my receipts. And then I do have to set a timer because I will go down into a rabbit hole for 5 hours. So setting a time on your calendar, committing to it. And then number 3 would be to hack your brain. Find something in your life or in your business that you already do habitually that you keep coming back to, and then find a way to tie in the tasks that you need or want to be doing to that tasks you're already doing. The way that I use this currently in my business is one of my hobbies is like playing around with paper. I make homemade paper. So when I go through my receipts and my junk mail every week, my reward is I get to shred it up and make paper from it.
Oh my gosh, I love that. How cool.
Yeah, like you got to tie it into something that you're gonna go back to over and over again to help you develop those new habits that you want to develop.
Yeah, I'm big on extrinsic motivators. I'm not like
Yes.
a very like internal motivator type person. I definitely need to have a goal or some reward like you were talking about
Yeah.
earlier. So I
Yeah.
think that really resonates with me for sure.
Yeah. And I'm like, yeah, how am I gonna hack my brain to do this thing that I know I need to
Yeah.
do?
Yeah, totally. Oh, well,
Yeah.
this conversation was amazing. Thank you so much for all the actionable steps that you shared and
Yeah.
also just like telling your story. I've really learned a lot and really appreciate everything that you shared.
Thank you so much for having me on. It was a pleasure to meet you.
Thank you for listening to the Employee to Boss podcast. If you made it to the end of this episode, I hope that you implement the actionable steps from this week's experts so you can get started with your business today. Please rate, review, and subscribe to the Employee to Boss podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. It helps more than you could ever imagine. Remember, a little progress each day leads to big results. We come out with a new episode every Tuesday. To access our show notes, transcripts, and courses, please check out espressopodcastproduction.com.